Hello and welcome to Hitbullseye. My name is Maneesh, and in this video we are going to discuss the topic of the week, and that is the Raisina Dialogue 2023. So what is the Raisina Dialogue? Raisina Dialogue is India's most premier diplomatic engagement exercise. Here, the world leaders come together on a single stage where they talk about different ideas, there are agreements, there are disagreements, and there are outcomes. This year, since the foreign policy is going through an uproarious time, there is a war going on in Ukraine in which almost the entire Western Europe, Russia, as well as US are engaged, and indirectly the entire world is engaged because we are in a globalized world. On the other hand, there are economic crises brewing in Sri Lanka, in Pakistan, and countless other countries. Also, there are tensions in the Asia Pacific because of the aggressive rise of China, and not to talk about the post-pandemic recovery in a global world order. In such a time, in such an uproarious time, this dialogue, it projects itself as an oasis in a desert, or as a lighthouse in the tempest. Tempest is an uproarious time. It's a tumultuous time, an unsettling time. And lighthouse in the tempest, which suggests that despite all the provocation, uncertainty, and turbulence in foreign relations in this time of the, in this particular time in 2023, this dialogue seems to find out or looks forward to finding out a solution to most of these problems. And that is what Raisina Dialogue stands for. And India has been hosting this Raisina Dialogue for quite a few years now. Let's take a look at what is happening. And also, this here is the facade of India's Rashtrapati Bhavan. So let's get started. This is the 8th Raisina Dialogue. That means the Raisina Dialogue started in 2015. And this year, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was the chief guest. So Italy's Prime Minister, Ms. Giorgia Meloni, was the chief guest at this year's Raisina Dialogue. And she was also the keynote speaker. So this was the 8th Raisina Dialogue. First happened in 2015. The theme, as we have already discussed, provocation, uncertainty, turbulence, lighthouse in the tempest. That is the theme of the dialogue, and it engaged with compelling issues reshaping the world order, negotiate volatility, explore solutions, and craft a collective response that will help lift all. So in these challenging times, this dialogue seeks to find out various solutions which are, acceptable to all the stakeholders. And because in diplomacy, it is always believed that dialogue is the ultimate solution. So this Raisina Dialogue, seeks to become that forum where dialogue on various uncomfortable issues will be held and common solutions will be found out. So the Raisina Dialogue this year comprised over 100 sessions. 100 dialogue sessions were there in the entire dialogue. There were studio sessions, roundtables, and associated events. On a whole, the entire dialogue was divided into 5 themes. The first theme, neo-insurgents, geographies, domains, ambitions. Neo-insurgents. Right? This particular theme talks about the insurgence of new forces, new countries, both in a positive as well as negative way. Geographies, domains, and ambitions. So very broad-based themes there were. Second theme, amoral mosaic. Contest, cooperate, or cancel. So broad-based that nations were prodded to find out what do they choose. Chaotic codes, sovereignty, security, society, the topics which are at the forefront of global crisis. Pernicious passports, climate, commons, citizens. As the former External Affairs Minister of India, Mr. Shashi Tharoor, puts it very beautifully, that there are certain problems which are without passports. There are problems that do not care about the political boundaries. The problems like terrorism, the problems like climate change, or like, let's say, the COVID pandemic. They do not care about your political boundaries. They spread throughout the world. So such problems without passports should have solutions without passports. That means all the countries should apply the similar measures irrespective of their political affiliations, irrespective of their political differences. And that is what this fourth theme talks about: pernicious passports, climate, commons, and citizens. And then the grey rhinos: democracies, dependencies, and debt traps. So these were the 5 themes across which the entire Raisina dialogue was concentrated. So now, what is Raisina dialogue? Having discussed what all happened, the discussions around which topics actually happened, what is Raisina dialogue? It is India's premier conference on geopolitics and geoeconomics. The geopolitics is a bit different, geoeconomics is a bit different, because it is economy which has come to drive global geopolitics, in the new era. And India, having become the 5th largest economy in the world, and also hosting the G20 as well as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization presidencies in this year, the Raisina dialogue this year was really very important. Just Google Mr. S. Jaishankar's statements on the Raisina dialogue, and you will find a lot of interesting insights into India's foreign policy. The conference is hosted by Observer Research Foundation, ORF. Observer Research Foundation, which is an independent think tank based out of Delhi. So Observer Research Foundation, in partnership with Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, hosts the Raisina dialogue every year. This year, it seeks to capture the state of the world through the theme, of course, provocation, uncertainty, turbulence, lighthouse in the tempest, as we have already discussed. It is structured, now this is very important, it is structured as a multi-stakeholder. So what is it that makes this dialogue different from all the bilateral and multilateral engagements that we see? In all those engagements, it is the state which is directly engaging. And here, it is various other stakeholders that get engaged, including the academics, including the business community, the journalists, the researchers, of course, the diplomats, policymakers, and the state, of course. So, multi-stakeholder approach is there. Cross-sectoral discussions are held. So, it's not that discussions only around economy or polity will be held. There are cross-sectoral discussions, which not only includes the existing domains, but also the upcoming domains. For example, there must have been discussions on artificial intelligence and how it can change the world. There must have been discussions on climate change and the funding for climate change that is required, and so many other things like that. It includes the heads of state, the cabinet ministers, and the local government officials as well, who are joined by thought leaders from the private sector, media, and academia. That is the approach that the Observer Research Foundation has tried to implement through the Raisina dialogue. And this year it is very important because of the same reason that India is hosting G20 as well as SCO summits this year. Now, what is Observer Research Foundation? Because this dialogue seems to be a really important and an all-encompassing forum to discuss so many vital issues. But what is this foundation which is at the forefront of this entire dialogue? Observer Research Foundation. It's an independent think tank based in New Delhi with its centers in Mumbai, Chennai, and Kolkata. It seeks to lead and aid policy thinking towards building a strong and prosperous India in a fair and equitable world, and helps discover and inform India's choices. So this is an independent think tank which seeks to make India a leader in the world, in a world which is fair and equitable. So it's primarily a foreign policy oriented think tank. It carries Indian voices and ideas to forums shaping global debates. So again, It provides non-partisan, independent, well-researched analysis and inputs to diverse decision makers in governments, business communities, and academia and civil society around the world. So there are such think tanks which are trying to bridge the gap between what the people want and what the state delivers. So Observer Research Foundation is one such think tank which is trying to provide intelligible data which can be acted upon and through which results, or let's say concrete results, can be delivered as far as the foreign policy is concerned. And this is a really important time for India. Let us not forget. This is a really important time for India because India is expected to lead the global south. Whether it is the 2021 Glasgow Summit of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, where India upgraded all its intended nationally determined contributions. That was also a signal to the developing world that we can do something extraordinary for achieving the global common, that is to reverse the climate change. And also India, along with South Africa, was at the forefront of seeking a waiver on intellectual property for COVID vaccines. Because again, the whole world has to be considered a single family. This is the same India which along with France launched the International Solar Alliance in 2015 after the Paris Pact, because we do believe that renewable energy is going to be the future of the world. Now the same India has the opportunity in 2023, being the president of G20 and Shanghai Cooperation Organization, how we can lead the global south or maybe the entire world in such tumultuous times into a new future, which is less polluting, which seeks to control climate change, which seeks to have peaceful relations, where wars like Ukraine conflict do not happen, or if they do happen, then dialogue seems to be the only recourse to correct that. And with all these hopes and high expectations in mind, India led the Raisina Dialogue. There were certain credible outcomes, and India was able to bring Russian and US foreign ministers under a single roof. First time since the Ukraine war started. Both the US Secretary of State Mr. Antony Blinken as well as the Russian Foreign Minister Mr. Sergei Lavrov, they came under a single roof under India's attempt to bring them together. And that was a real triumph of democracy as far as India is concerned. As a very famous foreign policy expert has put it, this is India's moment under the diplomatic sun. And what India makes out of it will be always remembered in the future. So with that hope that India really comes out with a credible solution to major problems of the world, not in this dialogue itself, in this entire year, in the G20 summit that's going to happen in November this year. With that hope, that is all about India's foreign policy, and the Raisina Dialogue is just a part of that entire effort. That is all from me, Maneesh Mittal. Thank you and take care.